What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Color Scheme Breakdown. This is a series in which I talk entirely too long about a particular color scheme in question. It's been a while, but basically what I do is I give you what the color scheme is. I break it down for you. Then I talk about anything history that why is that's important, like if it changed or anything worth noting. Then I give likes, dislikes, overall thoughts and opinions, just rambling about the color scheme itself. Then I wrap things up by talking a bit about how I would tackle painting this color scheme. I'm not a pro painter. So in that regard, I'm not going to give you some of the craziest stuff to consider, but I'm also going to give you insight as somebody who naturally struggles with painting some stuff. So how I would do it to have the least amount of struggle possible and have it be efficient as well. Basically, how to make it look sharp and how to make it look like maybe you did more than you did. That's always nice too, right? But in any case, it's a very simple foundational approach to this color scheme that anybody of any skill level could take and springboard off of if they wished or not. That's just there to be a resource if you want it. And then some closing thoughts. So these sometimes get a little long-winded, or could just be aware of that. So up on the chopping block this time, there's going to be some Necrons. And it's my favorite official Necron Dynasty, the Mephrit Dynasty. They are renowned star killers, star destroyers. They harness star energy to power all their stuff. They're pretty cool. With that said, what I like about this dynasty, and several others do this too, is that there's progression in their color scheme. Your basic rank and file don't represent the full color of the color scheme. Or the full coloration, I guess is a better way of saying that. And that's cool because while they'll still feel uniform, there's natural variance in your force to kind of help break it up as a painter, and B, for the eye of a full force. So with that said, before I tell you what it is, unfortunately, the current Necron Codex has no model pictures of Mephrit Dynasty, or even art, I think. Definitely no painted up models. I forget if it's the 8th edition Codex or one prior that has some pictures of a Mephrit army in their model showcase to kind of showcase some of the non-green and other coloration Necron forces out there. You can find some of these pictures on the web. You also find a lot of the fans' creations of Mephrit on there as well, and they're more or less pretty faithful to the color scheme. So it's just unfortunate that we don't get to see the Mephrit and other dynasties painted up in model form in the Codex. That's one of the things I mentioned in my initial thoughts of the Necron Codex. So it can be a little bit harder to find inspiration for the color scheme. You either have to go online, sift through some fan-based stuff, which is It's done pretty well. There we go. See if you can find anybody showing pictures of the inside of the older codices, or, and I don't recommend this at all, buying an older codex just to see the colors. So with that said, what are the coloration differences, or what are they? What is the color scheme of the Mephrit? Well, for the warriors, it's very simple. Your Necron warriors are going to be just basic iron steel color. The weapon housings will be black. The central part of their chest with the Necron Ankh on it is basically near black, with the Ankh being done typically in a brass type coloration. It's the energy of the Necrons for their weapons and their eyes, and anything else you're going to do for the Necron having glowing energy, whether you're going to do the chest radiating energy at all, or a resurrection orb, anything, melee weapon, ranged weapon. Their energy is orange. This really pops with these models. It looks great, but orange is difficult. However, it's done as energy, so that is helpful. We'll talk about that later. Anyways, it's an orange for their eye energy coloration and their weapon energy coloration. Really pops with this color scheme, even in this basic form like this. However, when you step it up, we get to see the true extent of the Mephrit color scheme. Immortals have this going on. In addition, their up-armored frames of the living metal body, since it has more armor on it, that extra armored stuff is done in a quasi-olive drab green. It's a little darker than standard olive drab green. The contrast paint for doing olive drab will work actually rather well here, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Basically, the way in which you would paint the Raptor Space Marine chapter green will work perfectly here, I think. So that's the type of green we're talking about for these extra armor panels. For the Immortals, it's on their shoulder pads. For other Necrons where they're suitably up-armored, it would be on those pieces as well. It's on the vehicles. Their Monolith is done in this green heavily. Flyers, other vehicles and stuff done in this green heavily. And then the Immortal has either their entire head or the central stripe on their head is done in a gray. It can be a basic kind of light gray, or it can be virtually white. I've seen some gradient in there for what people do. A near white type of gray could definitely be the way in which most people go here to be a nice pop of color. It could be the whole face, it could just be the stripe. With Necron Lords and Overlords, it tends to be the whole face, or a good portion of their ceremonial face stuff. The fan base has taken this white and put it elsewhere to make models pop. They put it on rib cages of some Overlords. They put it on the metal cape type stuff that they have going down. It's kind of user discretion there. It's also the Canoptex sensor receptor area, the plate that holds all their sensors. Basically, their head will be done in that way. Even the sensor receptor area of the Flyers tend to be done in that near white gray. It's just kind of at your discretion, right, as a pop color. It's not done heavily. It's just more of a pop color, with the green being more heavily done. And of course, all the energy being orange. It's a very sharp look, the full color scheme. And because there's some gradient to it, it's naturally diverse while being uniform, which is very nice. So I like it. I thoroughly enjoy this color scheme. It's different without being crazy out there. And I've seen some really awesome stuff for Necrons that people do, fan-based stuff, sandstone style Necrons, ceramic style Necrons. All of it looks great. But for kind of taking the core classic look and running with it, I really like how the Mephrit Dynasty does it. The orange pops. It's going to pop. The more brightly you do your orange, the more it'll pop. And it's not a bad thing. It's a nice pop of color, and that's what the Necron energy is there for. So it's refreshing because you're not trained to expect orange. Orange is my favorite color, so I double like it. But the green Necron energy is great. Nothing against it at all. But it's what we're expecting. So those dynasties like this one and some others out there that do their energy in a different color, it's almost like a refreshing pop of just a color you weren't necessarily expecting. So yeah, I like it. I wish it was showcased in the Codex, just because that's kind of what the model showcase is for, right? I feel if you have dynastic codes, regimental doctrines, chapter tactics, whatever, those forces should get some type of model showcase in there just to show people what it looks like when it's painted. But that's just me. So with that said, let's try to achieve this color scheme. Now, to do the basic body of the Necron Warrior and most of the Necron stuff out there, the metallic is going to be a basic iron steel type of way of doing the color scheme. You put down lead belcher or whatever type of base metallic you want, a little bit of wash, a little bit of dry brushing, and you basically have it done. How gleaming and how bright you make it, that's going to be up to your discretion, right? I personally would try to make this not dingy dark, but just like a darker steel. For me, I think it'll help orange pop a bit better. So you can easily not do that and have it be a classic, stereotypical, just standard run-of-the-mill steel iron look, and that'll look just fine. You don't need to make it pristine like silver, like a polished silver. Just your standard iron steel effect. The black, that's easy enough. Whether you're contrasting or not, that's super easy. You can do contrast paints for Necrons. They showcase it using the gray. I think it's Basilicanum gray or something like that, or I could be mistaken. It does kind of a quasi non-metallic metal effect for a steel. I recommend, particularly with the Mephrids and kind of in general, doing actual metallic paints for the metal portion. It'll just make the rest pop alongside it better. So black weaponry, pretty easy, very straightforward. You can do contrast black, or you can just do successive black wash over a dark gray to get it kind of there for you. The orange is where you're going to struggle. I know I'm going to struggle with it. I know in trying to do an orange Space Marine armor color for the main power armor, I'm still struggling. It's a difficult color to do. Orange is probably, of those more translucent colors like orange, yellow, and bright red, it's probably the more difficult of the bunch for sure. Orange just doesn't like to give good coverage, and if the pigment isn't true orange pigment but a red and yellow pigment mix to get it orange, it'll separate in some cases and it'll look a bit too yellow or a bit too red in certain areas. Regardless, this is less of an issue for the Mephrit because it's representing energy. Now, it's not an energy blade, it's still a solid blade, but it's coursing with this solar energy. The Gauss weaponry is this solar energy type of Gauss weaponry. This plays favorably for us because A, the orange isn't meant to be the sole color there. It's going to be highlighted up to yellowish, to represent it kind of gleaming, and also shaded down in certain areas to a near red. So the yellow doesn't have to be as perfect and precise. Even if you do that in a subtle way so it's not crazy highlighted bright up, if it looks a little streaky or a little bit yellow, too yellow in certain areas, but then goes into the orange and maybe becomes a little bit yellow again or whatever, it works. We're talking about coursing energy here. The natural imperfections of just not getting it quote unquote quite right is going to work out in our favor because we're talking about doing energy, not a solid paint type of color that you would paint onto, armor or anything like that. So that's actually kind of helpful. At least I think so. In doing it, though, you will probably get orange and maybe some yellows highlighted up, outside the lines, so to speak. But given that the weapons are black and everything else, this can actually work kind of in our favor because it'll be not as easy to tell. And even if it's there, you can play it off as a subtle kind of glowy energy effect, which tends to work in these situations, which is also nice. The contrast white will work great for that near white type of gray. I think that and just cleaning it up will look fantastic. Not much to do there. The olive drab type of green contrast paint, basically however you would do Raptors, and I went over that Space Marine chapter already. The way to achieve that color scheme is what I would do here for the Mephrit Dynasty's green on their armor. And this is again on their monoliths, on their vehicles, on any type of armored portion of a body of a Necron, and so on. So, outside of the orange, this is a rather efficient color scheme to paint. This could also be a fun Necron color scheme to do grim dark style because you can really kind of, darken the steel, tone it down quite a bit to make it pretty dark. So when you bring up the normal steel color, it looks like a pretty good highlight on your metallic. And then the green and the near white can be further dinged up, grim darked up, and still look pretty stellar. And this orange, if you worry about making the glow too strong and therefore too silly looking, because you're going grim dark, just the fact that it's orange is going to pop on it already. So that can be pretty nice. Anyways, with all that said, that's how I would approach this color scheme. And the more confident you get, the more you can do wet blending and gradation with the orange and really have it looking pretty good. The orange contrast paint could work here, but if you want to use that, the one thing I have noticed with experimentation is to truly get it to feel orange and not like a ruddy brown, you want to put it over like a pure white. That's what I've noticed personally, but experience varies there. Anyways, in closing, this is a rather solid color scheme. It is Mephrit. It is different. It stands out. It helps break up what could sometimes be considered boring for people to paint, which is Necrons. Even with the up-armored stuff, if all it is different types of metallics, it can feel a little boring. I have seen people, and I have thought about it myself, maybe kind of taking the Sawtech metallic color for the body and applying it to the Mephrit to switch things up and maybe showcase their allegiance to Sawtech or whatever. It's a thought. But this is basically Mephrit as it's intended, and then you could spice it up and modify it as you see fit. So with that said, this is definitely the route I'm going to go when I eventually paint up my Necrons. It's going to be Mephrit. It's going to be fun. So I look forward to that myself. Anyways, thanks so much for stopping by. If you made it this far, congratulations. Share your thoughts in the comments section below. And until next time, take it easy.